I have the pleasure of being with Richard Merrick today and been looking forward to this conversation tremendously. Richard is going to be participating, of course, on the 19th as a panelist, and we are very fortunate to have him. Richard, welcome, and I would love for you to introduce yourself, my friend.
Good morning, Si. Pleasure to be here. I sometimes struggle as to what to call myself because it keeps changing. Essentially, I'm a catalyst. And the work that I do, particularly at the moment, is causing people to see situations differently to the way they've been brought up and trained to see it. So a lot of the work at the moment around issues with COVID, for instance, is there are huge opportunities in it, but they're not dressed up in being the way that we were. So a lot of the work is about spending time with people, quite often sort of not in the office, walking out in the woods or wherever, actually just talking about what is really going on. And when people get behind almost the immediate busy brain reaction, that immediate stuff, we've got to do this because we've always done this, and because we've always done this, we're going to get back to doing it. If you can get out of that space and look at the value that they offer and how they offer it and where they offer it, then quite often we can readdress it. And so sometimes it's about working with people to get them to see things they don't want to see and to hear things they don't really want to hear, but to recognize the value that they have themselves and their business has if they concentrate on what they're really good at and what moves them. A lot of it is about combining languages. I mean, one of the things that has interested me particularly of late is we've sort of been brought up. I mean, I'm a boomer, right? But I was sort of brought up to solve puzzles. You know, that if you could get the right data and the right processes, and you could get them in the right order, you could solve a problem. And we didn't do much in terms of talking about soul or love or poetry in the businesses I was running, because they'd have taken me away and locked me up. But increasingly, I recognized that we were very shallow. We were very one-dimensional in our conversations, particularly around not just the people in the business, but the people associated in the business, the whole business system that we were part of. So I deliberately went out and started talking to the people who were in the space that I never really spent a lot of time in, which was very strange at first. But as you get used to it, you get used to the richness of it. And I sort of, to try and get it straight in my head, I divided them as I was walking around thinking about this into two groups of people. And the ones I called puzzlers, which is the sort of world I came from, which was all about finite games, budgets, time periods, return on investment, strategies, very much based on competition and relatively short reporting frames. And the other ones are called puzzlers, who were the other ones are called mystics. And the mystics, who are everything through from psychoanalysts all the way over to earth wisdoms. I started talking with people on everything from Aboriginal wisdom and North American First Nation wisdoms. I've done the dance around the medicine wheel, which felt really strange. I was really worried somebody was going to see me when I first did it. But you can't understand, I can't understand this stuff unless you get in and really engage with it. And the really intriguing thing for me has been, if you go around the full circle and you look in depth at some of the nature of the early wisdoms, pretty indistinguishable from quantum physics. So it sort of goes around and meets. And the interesting thing then becomes when you start talking to people in the language of the values of the mystics and the oneness of everything, poetry, soul, the journey of the soul. And so when COVID hit, because of work I've done with people, I got a group together of puzzlers and mystics and got them in the same room and got them talking to each other. And the result, quite frankly, was staggering. Because never did I really think at the end of last year that I would have a senior tax accountant talking about the journey of the soul. I mean, that just didn't resonate. And it's not about dancing around the fire and going too mystic. It's about human values. It's about the real purpose of what we're doing, and not just for other people, but ourselves. And if we sort of go with the notion of the soul or the psyche, or everybody has a genius and we're all here, we all have a unique contribution to make, if we can, if we can identify it and surface it. That is not as far below the surface as I thought it was. And as we've gone into COVID, and I think there's an aspect of it, it's existential. A lot of people have died. People will continue to die. It's not going to go away substantively anytime soon. And there is an aspect of it as well, which I think people are increasingly aware of. The COVID-19 is a bit like a formal warning. We're on our way to climate change, and if we try and treat COVID as a bump in the road or a one-off, we're sort of missing the point. So I can't help feeling that in its own way, nature has just a quick smack around the ear and said, "Excuse me, are you paying attention here?" And a lot of people get that, and so there is a period of fluidity, I think, at the moment in the way that people are thinking and talking, which is, whilst it's not overt fear, it's sort of covert fear. It's there. It's this awareness that actually we're although we don't like to think about it often, we're actually sort of mortal. We're sort of finite here. And people over here in the UK, people I talk to who have been spending 2 hours a day commuting into London, and another 2 hours a day commuting back out of London, have discovered all of a sudden that they have a wife and family, and they don't miss that commute. And the way that we operate on Zoom and other media is changing insofar as, we don't do it in a suit and tie anymore. So a lot of the formality has dropped away, and with the informality has come authenticity. So you see people in a setting, and the dog runs across the back of the screen, or the children come up, jump up and down, and it makes the conversation a joy, because you're still dealing with what you have to deal with, but all of a sudden you're talking to a human being as against a mask. And so I think one of the things I'm reminded of is that there was a piece of research done that after 9/11, America was going to be a kinder, gentler place. And you think back to the existential shock that was for us. And it didn't last. This is different insofar as it's affected the whole world. At the same time, there isn't a culprit. There's nobody to blame. It's systemic. It's happened. And I think, and it's gone on. It's gone off. If you follow the stuff on habit, different views, but it's about 12 weeks to change a habit. Guess what we've been doing for 12 weeks? And I think people, it's not a question of going back to the old normal, because it's not a new normal because it's not settled. But they can't just resume. It's going to be very difficult, I think, for a lot of people to resume what they were doing, because it's not that they've forgotten how to do it, but they've been doing different stuff for long enough for them to go back to what they did before is an active change. It's not a resumption. Yep. It's an active change from what they're doing now. And within that, here am I as a white boomer, privileged in all sorts of ways, as are a lot of the people I talk to. And we cannot understand. We can empathize, I think, but we can't really understand what's happening with other people. But we've got to damn well find out. We have to open ourselves, just as and we can all do it, because this, for a lot of people, has been a really rough time. And we have to recognize that. And we have to develop, we have to change the nature of the conversation. And I think that means coming back full circle on this, finding a place for the puzzlers and the mystics to actually meet in the middle and develop a new language that is about compassion, which is about consideration. It is about recognizing the planet is a finite resource. It is the word that I've been getting tax accountants to say. We can talk about love without blushing, you know, and we're English. So bear in mind, just bear in mind how difficult this is, all right? But there is a huge opportunity here.
Yeah. Richard, I love listening to you. There's a few things you kind of really mentioned that I want to sort of emphasize and then see how, you know, what comes up for you as you consider these. I recently, as a week ago, I sort of emphasized that we're in a period of renaissance, very, very much in what the COVID experience has triggered at this juncture, a bit of a renaissance. You just emphasized the word, it's an existential shock. So an existential shock would send us into a renaissance, very, very congruent, if you will, in what we're experiencing. As I listen to what you're describing, and you start off by saying that you're a catalyst, and so you've got existential shock, you've got renaissance, you've got a catalyst. And then as I hear you about the puzzlers and the mystics, it's as if we're moving toward a higher degree of wholeness that we have been fragmented throughout our history, we can call it. So kind of given that backdrop, is that one way to really think about the mystics and the puzzlers coming together? Are we looking to heal and to achieve a greater degree of wholeness and integrity as a whole?
I don't know whether we're seeking it or whether it's something that we're going down. One of the metaphors as I've been investigating this now, as you know, Sire, I'm a reader, all right, and I'm curious, and I go around lots of places. But one of the things I've been drawn back to, funny enough, is alchemy. And I was going through and looking at the first work in terms of people determining alchemical processes. And if you don't think about alchemy, it's also the basis for a lot of psychoanalysis.
Yeah.
It's also inherent in tribal rites of wisdom, rites of passage. So there's a lot of ancient wisdoms that bring the same thing in. But essentially, alchemy was a four-stage process. It started off with what they called nigredo, or the blackening, which is the reduction of everything to a level. In psychology terms, we talk about it being the dark night of the soul. And to a certain extent, for the current economic system, the way we've been working, this is a sort of bit of a dark night of the soul, really. And then they talked about albedo, which is a whitening, which was purifying this chaotic mess that, you know, from the blackening, from the nigredo, and purifying that to get it ready. And then there's a lovely bit called Syntrinitas, which is what they called the yellowing, and that was, in psychological terms, it was the reemergence of the soul. It was bringing the soul up from, you know, where it had been buried, looking at it in a new way, sort of having cleansed. And then they went to rubedo, and rubedo was integrating this emergent soul into the new being, and back you go into the world. If you're not into alchemy, a lot of people have heard of Campbell's Hero's Journey. You can map it entirely across the hero's journey.
Yeah.
So I suspect, in terms of what we're doing, this is not deliberate, because we know Heisenberg stuff is that we can't understand the system from inside the system. So there's a lot of things here where people are really puzzled. So we're on a journey that people are discovering rather than, I think, doing with intent. But as we go down this road, I think people are beginning to become more aware. There is a humanness about people. And so I think, whilst people may not have said, oh, I've got a good idea, let's be more compassionate, right? What we're seeing is different ways of knowing. We've been brought up to very intellectual ways of knowing. And if you go through things like Gestalt, we have other ways of knowing. So we have intuitive ways of knowing and emotional ways of knowing and the embodied sense of knowing. You know, we may have the answer really cracked in our head, but if we don't feel comfortable, something's amiss. And I think in some of the conversations that we're having, people are more open to that. Whereas before they didn't have time, because they had to get off the tube and get a coffee and get to the desk to answer their 364 emails before their 9 o'clock meeting. And it wasn't time for it to interfere. Now they're doing it, and they're actually having time. You know, there is this horrible point in their day where they've actually got time to think. And as you know, I mean, thinking's a really dangerous thing.
Yes.
And so I think there is awareness, there is a latency in people. And so I don't think we're doing it deliberately, but I think we can catalyze it. I think we can enable it. I think we can bring it to the surface. Because capitalism is a good system. It only goes horribly wrong when we make it entirely asymmetric. And it's a bit like where I'm sat here. I'm sat in the place where the first industrial revolution happened in the UK. And one of the prime inventions in the industrial revolution for machines was a thing called the governor, which managed the speed of the machine.
Mm-hmm.
Really simple device. We do not have a governor on our economic system.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore the thing is in danger of running out of control and consuming more than it needs to consume. And it's not generating the energy it should generate. We could do all sorts of metaphors with it. But I think there is a possibility here of an enlightenment, okay, of an awakening, of a realization that actually we can do this different. You know, we know that we have enough money in the global economy, even now, to pay every person on the planet, I think $11,000 a day was the figure I saw. Now, somewhere between where we are in that, there's a more equitable system.
Yes.
And I think it's bringing that conversation to the surface and having it okay for a merchant banker to talk about love and equality. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what mask we wear when we go to work. The last time I looked, we're all human underneath.
Mm-hmm.
And I think bringing that humanity to the surface and honoring it and making it respectable, that's probably not a bad idea. And I really don't like the idea of the alternative, because I don't think we'll come out of it very well. So it's difficult, but if we're not going to do it now, when are we going to do it?
Yeah. That's brilliantly said. And, you know, you and I met very recently, and it happened very, very quickly. It's interesting how the use of language is always, because we've both have looked at ourselves as catalysts over the years, and alchemy has been key. I think we've both probably called ourselves alchemists as well, in the same vein. One thing that, especially in the backdrop that I provided, and I love the way that you expressed it. It's not so much intent, and it's not so much, if you will, deliberateness. There's a balance there, but it really comes back to a degree of awareness that now we have to confront. We no longer can shy away from what's in front of us at this point. What are your thoughts? I mean, is there?
Yeah.
Can we again deny this, and it would be at our own, detriment, of course.
One of the people I work with who's very interesting, he's ex-Royal Marines, English, the Royal Marines, a 10 psychotherapist. I was talking to him and he was talking about work, and one of the metaphors he uses is imagine you're in a fast flowing river. You've got two choices. You can either go with the flow and enjoy it and learn how to go downstream, or you can turn around and try to paddle like hell upstream. That's really hard work. And I think we're in that sort of position. For all the people who want to go back to normal, the old normal, it's a bit like trying to turn the kayak around and paddle upstream through white water. It's not going to happen, all right? So we may as well get used to and follow the flow downstream and do it with elegance and grace.
Very well said. Very well said. I know I'm definitely eating into your time, my friend. Any last words of wisdom to leave us with at this point? And I have to say the blogging that you've been doing and the writing, and I can't wait for the 19th and having your contribution there especially, but absolutely brilliant, Richard. But any last words before we sign off?
Yes, I think I'd go back to one of my favorite Americans, FDR. And he actually said, you've got to do what you can, where you are, with what you've got. I think that's where we are.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for making the time, Richard. You're a tremendous human being, and it's always a pleasure spending time with you.
It's a pleasure talking with you, Si. Take care.
Thank you.